what's up? This is Patrick. Welcome to episode 24 of the Double ETF podcast, Everything Except the Football. I hope you guys are doing great. Today, I talk with retired firefighter Tom Neuerburg from the West Coast. Some jobs are just better when it comes to anecdotes, and firefighter is one of them. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, good energy, talked about sports as well. So, if you want to contribute to the show, you're more than welcome. You can drop us a review on iTunes or wherever you want. You can drop us a few rubles as well at paypal.me/EETFpod. And you can join the awesome club like Carly, like Kevin, like Josh, like Nick, like Ambags, like Hector, and like Tom. Tom Neuerburg was nice enough to give us not only some of his time, but a few shekels as well. It is very much appreciated. And all your donations are all used towards the show, either for podcast hosting or software, or don't worry, I like to think it is wisely used. So if you want to drop us a line, you can do so at EETFpod on Twitter or EETFpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tom Neuerburg, and we will talk again soon. Thanks. All right, with me today, I have the pleasure of welcoming to the show Tom Neuerburg out of, I was going to say San Francisco, but you're not quite from there.
Nearby. I'm about 40 minutes to an hour away, depending on the traffic.
Okay.
I'm midway between San Francisco and Sacramento.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We've met before. You were at the Rock Solid Live listener show in March 2018, right?
I was. Me and my wife were there, and I remember you being there. I didn't know you at the time, but I think they spoke about your habit of wearing the horse head in different locations. I think
Yes.
they brought that up that night, and I remembered that.
Yeah, there you go. That was me. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
My name is Tom Neuerburg. I'm about to turn 55 years old. I am a retired firefighter. I've been retired for about a little over 3 years now. I'm married. My wife and I will have our 34th anniversary later in October. I have 3 kids. I have a son who's 32, a daughter who's 29, and my youngest daughter is 26. They're all grown out of the house. My wife's a registered nurse. I started my career as a firefighter on July 1st, 1991, and she started her career as a nurse 2 weeks later, July 15th, 1991. The only difference is I'm retired and she's not. I live in a town called Tracy, which, like I said, it's east of the Bay Area, about halfway between Bay Area and Sacramento, and moved here. We got married in 87. We moved out here in 93 because at the time, this was a much more affordable place to live, than the Bay Area. The Bay Area is so expensive. It was expensive back then. But the funny thing is even here where I'm living now isn't very affordable anymore. And if I had to buy a house here now, starting out, I probably couldn't afford it.
No, yeah, probably not.
But most of the people in my town, they all are people that live here and commute into if not the Bay Area, at least into Livermore, which is about a half hour away. And that's where the Livermore National Lab is, where they do a lot of defense stuff. That's the place where Martin Sheen used to get arrested about once a year. He'd go out there and protest, So a lot of people in my town, they work there at the lab.
Okay.
But also in the Bay Area or in the San Jose area doing internet, tech. I'm drawing a blank. What the hell do they call that area where everybody
Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley, yeah. That's
all right. Okay.
So that's about it. I love sports. I love music. I love movies, books. I'm trying to be a very active person. I'm really into exercising and running and doing my yard work, taking care of my dogs, all that kind of stuff.
Nice. Okay, you live near San Francisco, but where are you from originally?
I'm from a town called Hayward, And Hayward is in the Bay Area. It's in the East Bay. It's about 10 to 15 minutes south of Oakland.
Okay.
I was actually born in Berkeley.
Okay.
And then my first 2 or 3 years, I was in Oakland, and then my parents moved to Hayward. I don't really remember Oakland that much. I don't remember it at all, to be honest with you. So I grew up in Hayward. So like if someone asked me, what's your hometown? I would say Hayward, even though I've lived in Tracy longer now than I lived in Hayward.
So you've always lived in California?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the firefighting thing is the most intriguing to me, to be honest, because I know nothing about what training is needed, if there is a specific career path to it, you know?
Okay.
So let's start with the beginning. Did you always want to be a firefighter?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, like my last senior year of high school, senior year, I think, I worked at a Chevron gas station, and it was like the old-fashioned gas station, like we actually put, you filled the car up, you checked their oil, you checked their tires, And so I was working at this gas station with, and a couple other guys I went to high school with worked there. And man, I really loved that job. Yeah, that was a fun job to have in high school,
Mm-hmm.
And so then a Price Club opened up in Hayward. Now, do you know what Price Club is? Price Club became Costco.
Costco, yeah. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So back then it was called Price Club.
Yeah.
But no one knew what the hell a Price Club was back then. You know what I mean? And we didn't know what it was.
Same here.
And one of my buddies at the gas stations was like, hey, there's a Price Club that's going to be open up. We should go apply there. They pay way more money. Like at the gas station, we were probably making like $4 an hour, and Price Club was going to start you off at like $9 an hour.
Okay.
So anyway, I got hired at Price Club, and that's how I met a guy I got to be real friendly with there at Price Club. And I had different jobs at Price Club. I started off as a guy who stocked the shelves, drove the forklift, did all that. And those shifts were 4 a.m. to 12:30 noon, right? Because you did all that before the store opened.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I decided to go back to school, and I wanted to go back, just to community college and take some classes. So then I started working day and afternoon shifts, and I got a job. You know how the security guys, they call it security at Costco. They're the people that stand at the door, and they either look at your card when you come in, or they check your receipt when you go out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I started doing that. So another guy that was doing that with me, his name is Glenn. So me and him got to be good buddies. If you're working at Price Club during the slow hours, which, to be honest with you, back then, there were no slow hours because there wasn't a Costco in every town the way it is now. People drove for miles and miles to come to our Price Club. So we were always busy. But, when you're standing there checking receipts, you always have time to bullshit a little bit. And so my friend Glenn, he was going to school to become a firefighter. And he'd come into work and he'd be telling me, oh, man, he was in the academy where you're actually outside doing things, you're not sitting in a classroom. And so he'd come into Costco or Price Club, and we'd be talking, and he'd be like, "Oh man, you should have seen what I did yesterday. I got to rappel off a 100-foot tower, and I got to crawl through a smoky room and rescue a dummy, and and all this stuff he was telling me. The more I heard, I was like, man, this sounds like fun, So I started to get more interested in it. The problem was back then, and even now, but I think back then it was even worse. To get into the fire department was such an in-demand job, and there was such competition,
Okay.
that my thing was I was always afraid of like, I'm going to go through all this, but I'm never going to get a damn job because there's, I'll put it this way. When I got hired, I was hired with 3 other people. So 4 of us got hired.
Mm-hmm.
1,500 people tried out for those jobs.
Jesus.
So
okay.
the competition was intense. But anyway, that's how I got interested, was my buddy Glenn coming back to work and telling me about all the fun stuff he did. And, it was a very physical job, very active job. And, I never could be a guy that sat behind a desk. I just couldn't do a job like that. And I didn't like being a warehouseman and doing warehouseman work. There's nothing wrong with a good, hard, honest day's work, but it just wasn't something I could see myself doing the rest of my life. I needed something different. And my original plan when I got out of high school was I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I wanted to be a sports journalist.
Okay.
That's what I really wanted to be.
Okay.
And then I got married so young, and, I started thinking like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do a job like that. You got to travel so much. And I've already got a wife. And so I kind of put that on the back burner. And so that's how I got interested in the fire department. It was through my buddy Glenn. And the funny thing is Glenn got hired by the fire department. It was called Eden Consolidated at the time. He worked for them for about 2 years, and then he went to a different department called San Ramon Valley. And then the way it worked out was I ended up getting hired by Eden. I kind of took his spot.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I mean, even though, the people didn't know me and they didn't know me and him had a connection, but it just was kind of funny the way it worked out. In some ways, I basically ended up taking the spot that he left at Eden, and he went on to San Ramon. And when I got hired by Eden Consolidated, we were a small department. We only had 3 stations.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we went through a bunch of consolidations with other departments, and we became what's called Alameda County Fire. And by the time I retired, my department had 35 stations.
Oh, wow.
It ended up being a bigger department than the city of Oakland,
Wow. And as you probably can guess, I know nothing about how it works. How many people work in a station usually?
Well, it depends. There's different kind of stations. Like if you have a single house, what they would call single house,
Mm-hmm.
where there's one fire engine.
Okay.
Okay. So basically one piece of equipment, one piece of apparatus. Most places, 3 people work at that station.
Okay.
And you have the captain, who's basically the supervisor. You have the engineer who drives. And then you have the firefighter. He's the guy that sits in the back, and he's the guy that's the workhorse, right? Although the captain does a lot of work too. The engineer would be the guy, if you went to a fire, if you were the first ones there, he'd be the guy operating the pump panel and giving you the water and the hose and calculating what water pressure to give you and doing those hydraulic calculations in his head, right?
Okay.
Now, if you go to a bigger station where they have, like say, an engine and a truck, and then maybe a battalion chief, then there could be up to 7 or 9 people working at that. And that's what they call a double house.
Okay.
Okay.
But okay, I gotta stop you. When you mentioned engine, I thought you meant fire truck. That's not the same thing?
No. Okay. This is a good lesson then.
It might be a language barrier as well.
No, it isn't. It isn't. Because everybody gets confused about this.
Okay.
So a fire engine and a fire truck are 2 different things.
Okay.
And this is the way to look at it. A fire engine carries hose, and it has a tank in the middle of the, in the center of the engine, which you can't see. And a fire truck has the big ladder in the back that goes up 100 feet. And their primary job at a fire is to cut vent holes in the roof.
Okay.
To do search and rescue if they think people are inside the building. Okay. Whereas a fire engine, they carry water and hoses. Their primary job is to attack the fire and put it out.
Okay.
But yeah, people intertwine those phrases all the time.
Okay, so that would mean that the type that connects to a fire hydrant is a fire truck because the engine already has the tank?
It's a fire engine.
Oh, okay.
The fire engine will also connect to the hydrant.
Okay.
Because there's also, I forgot, another main component. A fire engine has a pump.
Okay.
All right? That
okay.
Pumps. That's why a fire engine sometimes is called a pumper. There's a pump in there that pumps that water. A truck doesn't have that.
Okay. So a truck doesn't use any water at all, basically?
Only if you hook up a hose to it and there's a hose that goes, or a pipe that goes up that aerial ladder.
Yes.
And then shoots water out the tip of the ladder.
Okay.
They use water in that way.
Okay.
But they don't carry a lot of hose. They're not doing a fire attack with a hose line.
Okay.
And here's another way to tell them apart.
Please.
The fire truck, that's also the one that has the guy in the back that steers the rear end of the truck.
Yeah, okay.
And that's called a tiller. That's called a tillerman.
Okay.
So that's a truck. Trucks are big, engines are smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Engines have hoses, trucks have ladders. Think of it that way.
Okay. Huh. I bet that's the first thing that they teach you at the academy.
Well, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's see let's see if you know the answer to this.
Please.
How much does a pound of water weigh?
A pound. Well, I mean, how much does a pound of? Okay, nice try. You almost got me.
Well, that's what we use that all the time. We use that on like new guys all the time because one of the things you learn, when you're a new guy is you have to calculate the weight of water. Like for example, if you got a 2-story, 3-story building and you're shooting a bunch of water up into those upper floors, the weight of that water, that could make that collapse, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So one thing you're always taught is a pint of water weighs 1 pound. Okay.
Really? Okay.
A pint of water weighs 1 pound. So you get that nailed into your head all the time, right? And then a gallon of water, it weighs about 8 pounds. So we're always taught that a pint's a pound, a gallon is 8 pounds.
Yep.
So then when you ask a guy, how much does a pound of water weigh? They always say 8 pounds. And you say, no, a pound of water weighs a pound.
Yes.
It's like what's heavier, 20 pounds of bricks or 20 pounds of feathers?
Yes. Yeah. That's an old classic. That's true. Okay, because I wasn't sure because, as you know, we use metric here mostly, and a liter is 1 kilogram of water, because the density is 1 or very close to it. So it's super easy to, calculate. And like, for example, if you take a cube of water, 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, that's 1 metric ton. That's 1,000 kilograms. So
see, now I'm learning something.
Okay, so awesome. Perfect. All right. So, okay. So that's how you got into the firefighting life. So do you get into the academy, I guess, and how long is that?
Okay. So how it works is once you decide like, okay, this is something I want to pursue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you go to, I was lucky because in my case, the community college that was right there in Hayward, they had a fire science program. Okay. So you go and you take classroom classes, and I forget how many there were, but let's say there was maybe 8 of them. And you have to take those classes, and they cover different things, fire science and fire department history, alarm systems, sprinkler systems. I forget. But anyway, you have to take all those classes.
Mm-hmm.
Then once you complete those classes, then you could go take an academy, which is called Firefighter 1. Okay? And it's put on through the college, but it's very similar to the type of academy you would go through if you got hired by a fire department. Okay?
Okay.
It's very similar. You're out there throwing ladders, doing hose, tying knots, search and rescue, learning all these things, and you're out there physically doing it. You're not sitting in a classroom all the time. You're actually out there doing it. Now, in conjunction with that, you also need to take advanced first aid classes,
mm-hmm.
and then the next step after that is called EMT. I don't know. Do you guys have that in Canada? EMT?
Emergency medical technician.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Paramedic, pretty much?
It's a notch below paramedic.
Okay.
EMT does everything a paramedic does with the exception of you cannot administer medicine via an IV.
Okay.
And you couldn't, oh gosh, there was one other thing you couldn't do. And I'm drawing a blank on what it is because it eventually changed so that you could do it. But the main difference was starting an IV and administering medications. That was something a paramedic can do that an EMT couldn't do.
Okay.
And back in my day when I was trying to get hired, which was the late 80s, to take a test for a fire department, they would put out minimum qualifications, right? And the minimum qualifications would usually be you need to be at least 18 years old, you need to at least have a high school diploma,
mm-hmm.
and you need to at least be an EMT and have your Firefighter 1 certification. That means that you went through that Firefighter 1 Academy through a community college. Okay?
Okay.
So that's what I did. So I made sure that I got my EMT, and I made sure that I took all my classes, and I was able to take my Firefighter 1. And once I had those two things, then I was ready to test and try to get a job. But you got to remember, I was doing all those things as a married man and as a guy who was also working a full-time job.
Okay, so you were still working during that time?
Yeah, I was working at Costco. I'll tell you, it was tough because so many guys. I got married young. I was 21 when I got married. So I'm going to these classes with a lot of guys who are 18 years old. They're still living at home, and all they have to do is go to these classes. And I worked a job in Oakland at the time. Actually, you know what? This was after I left Costco, and I was working in Oakland, and I was working for this magazine distributor, and we distributed every magazine and every book that was in every store in the Bay Area. So every magazine, from the filthiest, nastiest porno all the way up to like Time and Newsweek and everything in between, it came out of our warehouse. and I was working swing shift. Okay. So I would work 3:30 to midnight in Oakland. And since I was on the swing shift, there was always a set amount of work that had to be done every day because you had to fill all these orders that these guys took out on the trucks.
Mm-hmm.
When midnight came, if we weren't done, we couldn't go home because we had to get that finished, right? There were many, many nights where I went in to work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and worked all through the night until 6 in the morning
Jesus.
because that's when the day shift came back on.
Okay.
And then I had to jump in my car and drive from Oakland all the way down to San Jose City College, where I was doing my EMT class.
What's the distance?
45 minutes.
Okay.
Well, maybe worse, depending on traffic. But I mean, I was up all night long. And then I had to go do my EMT. And then basically turn around and go back to Oakland to work. I mean, it was tough, man. It was so tough. And so when I finished all that stuff and I got through it, man, I really felt like I had accomplished something,
Mm-hmm.
In reality, I hadn't accomplished anything. I now was able to try to get a job, Then I was ready to go out and start testing. And like I said, such and such city, okay, we're hiring firefighters. And you'd show up to take the test. And I mean, there would literally be 2,000 people there.
God.
And you talk about how that could really knock the motivation out of you, because
absolutely.
Because you're like, oh my God, what am I going to have to do to get hired? I got to beat out all these people, And so from the time I started trying to become a firefighter, I seriously started that till the time I got hired. It was basically 3 years. It took me 3 years to get it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which, thinking back on it now, that was actually pretty good,
Really? It takes more time than that usually?
It could have.
And when they test you to become a firefighter, well, I suppose there is a theory part and a physical part.
Well, what happens is you go in. This is how it went back then. It's changed a little bit over the years, but back when I was doing all my testing, the way it worked was you went in and you took 100-question, basically a Scantron test, right? Do you know a Scantron test where you fill in the bubbles with a number 2 pencil?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So you'd go take 100-question test, and let's be honest, that probably didn't knock out too many people because most people were studying and knew these answers. Mm-hmm. If you pass that, and it was usually a pretty high percentage, like you had to get at least 80%, let's say.
Okay.
So let's say you pass that, then you got invited back to do what they called the physical agility, and that was where you would run, jump over a wall, grab a hose, pull a hose, run up a ladder, run down the ladder, swing an axe 100 times, and you would have to do all this within a certain amount of time. And if you pass that, now that would eliminate all the people that weren't in good shape, so that would eliminate some people. And then if you pass that, then you were invited back to do an oral interview where you basically came in, you'd wear a suit and tie, you'd come in, you'd sit at a desk, and there'd usually be 3 or 4 people there, firefighters, sometimes like a concerned citizen, that someone who was really involved in their community.
Okay.
And you would sit there and they would ask you about 5, 6, 7 questions, and you would have to give an answer. And to be honest with you, that oral interview, a lot of that was a big mind fuck, because they really did play the good cop, bad cop routine on you, where, one person would ask you a question and they'd just sit there like, oh, acting so interested. And the other guy would sit there twiddling his thumbs and like acting like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world, rather than sitting there listening to you. It was a mind game, and that took more practice than anything, was learning how to be a good interview candidate. You know what I mean?
But it's strange because you don't work with the public as a firefighter.
Well, you know what though? Think about it. You do. Every time we'd go out in public, people come up to us, ask us questions, and you really do. You really do have to learn how to work well with the public, speak
under stress.
Under stress. You have to learn how to do public speaking because so many times we're asked to go talk to schools and community groups, or the kids. They come to the fire station for field trips and tours.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, see, I love doing that. I would always lead the tour, but I mean, I had a guy in my crew, he hated that. He just wasn't comfortable with that. He didn't like doing public speaking, So it's funny, like you're right. You wouldn't think that. Well, that's not a big part of your job, but it actually is, because on a daily basis, we go shopping every day, right, to the grocery store for our dinner. Well, while we're in that grocery store, you'd be surprised how many people come up to us. Hey, can I ask you a question? Hey, can I ask you? You know what I mean? All the
Okay.
time, and so you do have to be good with the public. I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay,
My
but sorry, but now that you mentioned it, yeah, you're absolutely right, because also you represent the city
Mhm.
during your work, so you can't really tell people to fuck off.
No.
I got a fire to take care of. You
Yeah.
can't really do that.
You're right. You can't do that. And I will tell you right now, if you did do that, my chief, or at least the chief at the time, he was always going to take the side of the citizen. Always.
Oh,
Because his
okay.
thing was he ran our fire department like he ran it like a business. Like, I kind of saw a change in the fire service during my time there. When I was a new guy, I kind of got in on the tail end of fire departments that were run like with the good old boy network, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a new chief, and he ran our fire department like a high tech company, right?
Okay.
Where we had committees and meetings and things like that. I was going to tell you a funny story talking about doing public speaking, and, especially talking to schools and kids and stuff. And I always really liked that. So my daughter, who's now 26 years old and actually got married 3 weeks ago today.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, when she was in high school, I think she was a freshman or a sophomore, so that would be like 15 years old, 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a thing at her school where they wanted people to have their parents come to school and talk about like career day. And so she said, "Hey, would you come to school and talk about, talk for career day?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure," because I'd done that a lot. Like I've gone back to my old high school and done career day and talked to
Okay.
the kids. And usually it's like 10, 15 kids at a time, or you go into my kids' school and they talk to my class. Okay, well, it's like 30 kids, right? So she said, "Hey, would you come to my school and talk for career day?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. You want me to wear my uniform?" "Yeah, will you wear your uniform?" I go, "Okay." So I wear my uniform. So she says, "Oh yeah, just come to school, Tuesday at, 1 o'clock, whatever it was." So the day rolls around. I put my uniform on. I go to school. I go to her classroom. I knock on the door. The teacher comes to the door, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Emma's dad. I'm here to talk to the kids about, career day." And she goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." She goes, "I'll tell you what. Can you go over there to the cafeteria? We're gonna meet you over there." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, oh, that's weird. Yeah, whatever." So I'm walking over to the cafeteria. I get into the cafeteria, and here's this guy that works for the school, and he's setting up this big microphone and this big podium. And he sees me, he sees me in my uniform, and he goes, "Oh, you must be the guy giving the speech." And I go, "Well," I go, "Yeah." I go, "Why are you setting this? Why are you setting all this up for?" I go, "I thought I was just talking to my daughter's class." And he's like, "Oh yeah, you are." He goes, "You're talking to the entire sophomore class." And I'm like, "What?" And I look out the windows, and I see hundreds of kids, coming. And I thought I was going to talk to like 30 kids. I was talking to like 400 kids,
Jesus.
and I had no idea, right?
Wow.
And so I kind of had, like, for a second there, I was like, "Oh shit!" But then, I'm like, "Well, man, I can't back out of it now." They're all here, so they all come filing in, and my daughter comes walking in. And I'm like, "What the heck?" I go, "I thought I was talking to your classroom, not the whole damn school." So I did my thing, and it was fine, and it was funny because one of her teachers was there, and she always laughed. She's like, "Oh, Mr. So and so, whatever his name was." She goes, "Every time I see him, he always tells me, 'Your dad was the best speaker. I've been a teacher for 30 years, and your dad's the best speaker we've ever had.'" And I'm like,
Nice.
well, little does he know that for the first 10 minutes, I was scared shitless, and I was totally nervous, and I had no idea I was going to talk to all these kids. But anyway, yes, speaking to people, interacting with people, it actually is a big part of the job. You'd be surprised, but it actually really is.
But I guess you wanted to be a sports journalist, so you probably had a taste for, storytelling and stuff like that. So I guess that public speaking must not have been that difficult after all.
You know what, though? It's funny. You wouldn't know it now. And good friends of mine, they never know it now because I'll talk to anybody and blah, blah, blah. My own mother-in-law, we were talking about something a while back, and I said, "Yeah, I was a real shy like my first couple of years in high school, I was a really shy kid, and she looks at me, she's like, you were shy? I'm like, oh yeah, I was. But I'll tell you what else helped me was having a job, even working at that gas station and having to interact with people that would come in there, and working at Costco and having to talk to all those customers. It made me come out of my shell. You're forced to.
Yeah.
When you have a job where you have to deal with people and work with the public, you kind of have to learn how to talk with people, otherwise it's going to be terrible, But yeah, I have no problem now. I can chit chat with anybody.
Nice. So I had a question pop into my mind. Firefighting in movies, they must get it wrong all the time, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll ask you a question.
Please.
Off the top of your head, if I say firefighting movie, what's the first one that pops into your head?
I gotta say, Backdraft.
There you go.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Now, the funny thing is, it just so happened that when Backdraft came out at the theater, that's right when I was a brand new firefighter, right?
Okay.
So, man, I was fired up for that movie, and I remember going to see it, and man, I loved it. Okay, now fast forward, 30 years later. You want to have a good time? Go to a firehouse and watch Backdraft with a bunch of firefighters.
Okay.
You're familiar with Mystery Science Theater, that show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have a version of Mystery Science Theater as we all sit there and talk shit, as the movie's going on. It's like, oh, that would never happen. I mean, almost everything they do in that movie would never, ever happen in real life. And I'll tell you one right off the top.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that when you go into a fire, okay, yeah, when the fire's burning and it's raging and the fire's, burning out of control, oh yeah, you can see everything, right? But the second you open that hose nozzle and you put some water on that fire and the fire blackens down and the steam rises, you can't see shit. You could put your hand in front of your face and you can't see anything. Now, of course, in Backdraft, I mean, you can see everything. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, I love those scenes where...
can see through the entire building.
Yeah. And what's his name? Kurt Russell. There's that dramatic scene where he rushes into the fire and he comes out with a kid. He saves this kid. And he's got his jacket. His jacket's unbuttoned. He's got no breathing apparatus on. It's like, dude, you'd be dead. Okay, you'd be dead in 10 seconds if you did that. But I mean, that's the movies. I'm sure cops sit around and watch cop movies and say, "Oh, we'd never do it like that." It's the same thing.
But it's strange because when you think of movies with firefighters, Backdraft is, I'm not going to say the only one, but almost. Like, it seems underexposed as a job in the movies.
Well, I'll tell you one that was a much better quality, compared to Backdraft. Mm-hmm. And that would be the TV show Rescue Me with Dennis Leary.
Yes.
It still was very unbelievable because, I mean, God, if you watch that show, they made it out like, shit, every firefighter is an alcoholic and
yes.
pill popper, and you know what I mean? But it was at least it was a little more realistic than Backdraft, I mean, it was still unrealistic, but it was at least it was a little more gritty. Mm-hmm. And they obviously had a little more, probably better, like technical advisors, that they got the firehouse life and that stuff. They got that, better than Backdraft did. And I think Dennis Leary, I think he has some fire department connections. I think he's got like some Boston fire department roots in his family.
Okay.
But much better, much more realistic than Backdraft. But still, I mean, Jesus, those guys were, they'd be at work drunk and popping pills. I mean, we didn't do that, okay? I mean, that did not go on.
Yeah, but actually that brings a new question. Were there any doping tests or substance tests?
The way it worked out was they could not test you for that kind of thing unless you exhibited some behavior that would alert them that, hey, this guy's not acting quite right. And it's funny, I just said that that Rescue Me made it out to be alkies and pill poppers. But you know what? Hey, I got to be honest with you. We had a couple guys in our department that did have that problem and actually did get caught on duty. And what would happen was they wouldn't fire them. They'd send them like to rehab, and then, you got a couple chances and then
third strike, I guess.
Yeah. Then you were out,
Okay.
And luckily the 2 or 3 guys that happened to, they all did a good job at cleaning themselves up. And
good.
Speaking of that, Patrick, I'm going to pop a beer right now while I'm talking to you.
Please.
I want to be the first guy on your podcast to sit here and drink a beer and I'm sitting here in my underwear too. Okay,
Okay.
is that too much information?
No, that's okay. That's not a problem at all. This is an audio podcast, so there's no problem. No problem. So you were a firefighter for how many years in total?
28 and a half.
Okay. And then you retired about 3 years ago, you mentioned?
Just a little over 3 years ago.
Okay. So is it like the army, after 25 years, you can retire with full benefits and all that, or?
You get a pension, and your pension is based on how many years you work. So the longer you work, the better your pension is, your percentage, right? And then you top out at 30 years. So once you work 30 years, you can keep working, but your pension's not going to get any better.
Okay.
So what I did was, I lied to you a little bit. I actually worked 27 and a half years, okay?
Okay.
And then I had over 2,000 hours of sick leave that I had accrued that I didn't use. So what you were able to do was you could take 2,000 hours of sick leave and convert that into 1 year of service time, okay?
Okay.
So I worked 27 and a half years. Then I got a year credit tacked on because of all those sick hours that I did not use. So I left at 28 and a half years. I could have worked a year and a half more and, got a little bit more of a pension. It would have been I don't know, let's say 2%, 3%. But what was happening with me was I had a relatively injury-free career. Then my last 2-3 years, I started getting injured.
Okay.
And it was a combination of, I had a couple good injuries. I screwed up my knee, had to have surgery, screwed up my shoulder, had to have surgery. Combined with the last couple fires I went to, I had 2 really, really close calls where I almost got killed.
Jesus.
And so then I'm thinking to myself, okay, one of the great benefits of being a firefighter is not only how much I love my job and I love going to work, but one of the benefits is that you do get to retire much earlier than most people. Well, what good is it going to be for me to retire at a young age if I can't walk or if I'm dead? Right? So I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of ready to go, and I kind of feel like I'm pushing my luck a little bit these last couple years, and she's a nurse, and like I said, she still works, and I mean, my pension, I got a great pension. I mean, I cannot complain, and so yeah, I decided to retire, and I cut it off a year and a half short. I could have went another year and a half, but man, life's short.
Yeah.
You got to have fun, Yeah. And
absolutely.
Man, when you start getting knee injuries and shoulder injuries, and at one point I got a herniated disc in my neck, and I'll tell you what, if you've ever had that, oh my God, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That was horrible.
Okay.
And I just feel fortunate that I recovered from all those things, and I'm pretty healthy now, and I haven't regretted my decision at all. The only time I miss it, I've noticed, is it usually seems to happen if we're traveling somewhere, right? And I'm in a different city and I see a fire engine go down the street, especially if it's going, lights and siren. I'll get a little twinge of like nostalgia and like, oh God, I kind of wish I was still riding on. But that's it. That's the only time. And my son, my oldest kid is my son Ryan. He's 32. He got hired by the Oakland Fire Department.
Ah, nice.
And he just passed his probation a couple weeks ago. And as happy as I was, and I'm so proud of him and everything, and I'm so glad that he has a good job, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm glad it's you and not me.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm glad you're the guy that still has 25 years in front of you and not me,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned injuries. What kind of injuries are more frequent?
Oh, by far, back injuries. Back injuries are by far the most common. I mean, look at it this way. So I'll tell you something else about the fire department. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't know this. At least 75% of the calls that we go on are medical calls, okay?
Oh, okay.
They're not fire calls. I don't know if things worked different in Canada, but the common model of emergency medical service in the United States, like, we call 911, right?
Yes.
Do you have something like that there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in America, in most cities, if you call 911 and you say, I'm having a heart attack, I cut my finger off, any kind of medical emergency, the fire engine gets dispatched along with an ambulance.
Oh, okay.
And 9 times out of 10, the fire engine arrives before the ambulance does, right? Because fire engines, especially in big cities, they're close. Most people have a fire engine within 5-6 minutes of them, whereas ambulances, they patrol around the city. So you never know where they're going to be. If you call 911, hey, if you're lucky, maybe there's an ambulance down at the end of your street. If you're unlucky, maybe the ambulance is way on the other side of town.
Yeah.
So fire engines come first to medical calls. Now, what happens a lot of times on most people that call, okay, I'll put it this way. A lot of 911 calls are kind of bullshit calls, right? They're not always someone's
emergencies.
Yeah. Someone's life isn't always on the line when they call 911. Yeah. And what you get is a lot of people who are sickly, or they're in bad health, or maybe they don't have health insurance, so they can't afford a doctor, so they just call 911.
Okay.
Well, a lot of these people that are in bad health, let's be honest, a lot of them are usually pretty overweight. Okay?
Yes.
So guess what kind of people we're lifting all the time?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of overweight people.
Oh, my God.
So imagine this. Imagine you're in your bed at 3 a.m, you're dead, sound asleep, the tones go off, and 10 minutes later, you go from being sound asleep to 10 minutes later, you and your 2 buddies are carrying a 350-pound woman down 8 flights of stairs. It's a pretty good chance that you're going to hurt your back one of these. You know what I mean? So that's why back injuries are the most common.
And are there like a physical fitness requirement test every year or something?
You know what? That's funny you asked that, because there actually isn't, which is kind of a shame. My union, we fought for and won, probably 15 years ago. We wanted our department to, at the very least, send us all through yearly physicals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but like me, I have health insurance, but you know what? I don't go get a yearly physical. I should, but I don't. But at my job, we had to go on duty. We'd go get yearly physicals. And then that also would include like a stress test, on a treadmill.
Oh, yeah.
And a hearing test.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys they found out they had some bad hearing problems.
How come?
Because the sirens. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Even though we wear headphones.
Uh-huh.
And a fire scene, when you're on the scene of a fire, it's a loud scene, man. There's a lot of noise. Chainsaw. We run a lot of equipment. Chainsaws, rescue tools, all that stuff adds up. And so guys end up with a lot of guys end up with hearing problems. A lot of guys had heart issues that were found out because we had to do that stress test.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? No, there really isn't a physical
standardized, minimum requirement and stuff.
Now, luckily, for the most part, like firefighters, they're people that kind of take pride in their job. And I do think a lot of the firefighters kind of feel like, hey, part of my job is trying to stay fit, and trying to, at the very least, you want to give the appearance of a person who can, if called upon, could do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I always felt like, you know what? I worked my ass off to get this job. And this will sound vain, but it's like, I want to look good in my uniform,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to look like some fat ass, you know what I mean? And so for the most part, your average firefighter is the type of person who stays in shape and exercise. Mm-hmm. There's always exceptions, but on the whole, most of them are people that want to stay fit and be healthy and all that kind of thing.
So we just talked about physical fitness. So, okay, you've been through it. You spent your entire career in that field. Do you think there should be psychological follow-up? Could there be like PTSD episodes in, extreme cases? Or
yes, there can be, and there is. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that whole issue is being taken much more seriously in these last few years, mm-hmm. more so than when I was new. Like when I was a new guy, I think that kind of thing would have been looked upon as a weakness, like, mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Come on, man, And you know what? The mindset on that has changed for the better. Mm-hmm. And that was also part of the hiring process. Was you did go through a psychological evaluation.
Okay. If I ask you, you mentioned having a few close calls in the last years of your career. Would you want to talk about the one that sticks in your mind?
Well, it's funny because people ask me that a lot of
It's a
times.
cliche question, I guess.
Did you ever get killed? Did you ever think you were going to get killed?
Did you ever get killed? Sorry.
Did you think you're going to get killed? But here's the funny thing. For my first several years, I had a handful of close calls.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what they all had in common? They weren't probably what you would think, right? Like everybody thinks like, oh, you're going to die in a fire. You know what it was? I had so many close calls of almost getting hit by a car, like when we were out on the freeway, responding to car accidents.
Okay.
And cars coming by and almost hitting us. I mean, dude, I'm telling you. I had one where I literally had to dive out of the way of I was out on a busy freeway. It was at night. It was raining. And we look up and we hear screeching tires. And here's this 18-wheeler big rig truck jackknifed and sliding and right towards us. And we had to jump in the mud, so it missed us. And so my first 5 or 6 times where I would consider it close calls,
mm-hmm.
They all had to do with that, like almost getting hit by a car, and usually on the freeway. And you know what? It got worse and worse and worse. Huh. And I bet this will make sense when I say it, because as time went on and cell phones became more popular,
yeah.
I'm telling you, Patrick, I would be out on the freeway and we'd have a car accident, let's say, right? And let's say everything's done, like the patients are gone, we've swept up the debris, the emergency has been mitigated, and maybe all we're doing is we're standing out there waiting for like the tow truck to get the car off the road. And you know how in the middle of the freeway sometimes there's a concrete median, maybe about 3 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would love to do, I always love to like sit on that. I'd straddle that and I'd just watch the cars go by. Every single car, they'd be on their cell phone.
Jesus.
In these later years, right? Every single, or they drive by trying to film us.
Oh.
I couldn't tell you how many times in my last 10 years of working, we'd be out on any kind of call, you name it, car accident, a medical call if it was out in the public, a fire, whatever. And you'd look out and there'd be 20 people filming you with their camera. And then later that night, I'd go onto YouTube and I'd type in fire on Marina Boulevard, and boom, there it'd be. They'd already have the video on YouTube. And we'd be, oh, there we are,
Oh, my God.
But the close calls that I had right before I retired was I was stationed in a city called San Leandro, which is right next to Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
We got a call in the middle of the night for a fire at there was this complex that was right around the street from our station. And it was like a mom and pop grocery store. That was pretty good sized grocery store. And then off of that was some other smaller stores, I don't even remember, just small little stores. Anyway, So we get a call at I don't know, I think it was 2:30 in the morning that, hey, there's a fire at, actually it was Marina Boulevard.
Okay.
And it said outside fire at Marina Boulevard. And I'm thinking, outside, where in the heck would there be an outside fire at Marina Boulevard? There's no grass. That's all buildings and stores and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we get in the rig, we turn the corner, and that whole grocery store was on fire. Okay. And it was one of those calls where it was so close to our station and we had such a quick response time that, I'm still half asleep, right? And I'm the captain, right? I'm in charge and I'm trying to put my thoughts together and think about what we're going to do. And it just so happened that the firefighter I had with me that day was a relatively new guy, and he was a nervous wreck, So anyway, we pull a hose. I go, hey, pull the 2.5, that's a bigger hose line. I go, pull the 2.5. I'll meet you at the door. He pulls the hose line. I get up to the door with him. I tried to make forcible. I look inside and I could see that grocery store's burning like crazy. And I was just about to try to maybe force entry in there and go inside. And right when I was about to do that, part of the roof collapsed.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, if we would have been in there, oh my God. Okay. About a minute later, what I didn't know about this place was they had some big propane tanks that they stored in there.
Okay.
About a minute later, one of those big propane tanks exploded and it blew out the front windows of that grocery store.
Jesus.
Across the street, it was a 4-lane road out in front of this grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Across the street was a Shell gas station. And they were the ones that actually called it in because they saw it. The guy went out to have a break at 2 a.m. and saw the place on fire. There was debris from that grocery store across those 4 lanes and into the parking lot of that gas station. Well, my battalion chief, he thought we were in front of that window when it exploded. And it was funny because he comes around the corner and he sees me and he's like, "Oh, good. You're there. I thought you were dead." And I'm like, "Yeah, so did I, you know?" Okay, so there was that. And then a few months after that, I got reassigned to Berkeley. I was in Berkeley.
Do you have to move cities a lot?
I did it on purpose because
Okay.
I wanted to be in Berkeley. I like that station, and
Okay.
I had worked there before years ago.
Okay.
And so I went back there because at that point I knew I was going to retire in a year and a half. And I was like, oh, I want to go back there. I want to spend my last year there. Well, we get a fire there up in the Berkeley Hills, which is right near where the big Oakland Hills fire took place back in was it 91? I don't know if you remember hearing about that. All the houses burnt down, big fire, right? So anyway, we get a fire in that same area. It's on the side of this very steep hill. Long story short, I had a 4-person crew at that station.
Mm-hmm.
So who ends up on the side of the hill? Me and my firefighter buddy, who I've known since day one. We're the 2 old guys, and we end up on the side of this hill. And this fire's taken off, and we run out of water. Okay? The fire's coming up the hill. It's coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm yelling down at my guys, "Where's the water? Where's the water?" And they're trying to get it, connected to give us some more water. Chris is my firefighter up on the hill with me. Chris is he got about 15 feet away from me, which was bad. We got a little too far apart. That fire's coming up the hill. I'm standing there with an empty hose in my hand, and he's standing there with a hand tool, and that's all we had. And this fire's coming up the hill, and it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, we need to decide. They either need to get me some water or we need to run for it.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, Patrick, that fire came up the hill and it got in between me and Chris, and I couldn't see him. And all I could hear was somebody screaming. And I'm thinking, oh no. I mean, I'm thinking, oh my God, it got him, Well, right then we got some water. I get water in my hose. I start knocking this fire down like crazy. Now I got all this smoke. I can't see shit, all this smoke. Finally, the smoke dies down, and I look, and like, where's Chris? And he's nowhere around. And I look, and he's down at the bottom of the hill. And so why he was screaming was because he had just took off and was sliding down the hill, getting away from the fire.
Yeah.
Well, just about that. Now, remember, I'm still standing on the side of this steep hill, right? At just about that moment, I look up, and here comes this big boulder rolling down the hill.
Jesus.
And it came at me so quick that I literally didn't have time to react. I threw my hands up, but it had already passed me, right? And that boulder went across the top of my head. It probably missed the top of my head by about an inch.
Jesus.
If that thing, because it came out of the smoke, I didn't see it until it was right on top of me. If that thing would have been 6 inches lower, it probably would have killed me. It would have hit me right in the head, and it probably would have killed me. And after that, I'm like, okay, God or somebody is trying to give me a sign here. It's time to go. Okay.
Probably, yeah. Wow.
But it happened so quick, like you couldn't really be scared because it happened so quick, It was just like afterwards, you're like, I remember I turned and there was a guy from another city I didn't even know. And he looked at me and both of our eyes were like, and he looked at me and he goes, "That almost killed you." And I'm like, yeah.
Wow. But how big was that boulder?
Oh, dude, like 5 feet around.
Jesus. Okay. And, well, okay, I don't want to be morbid, but were there many casualties in the stations that you worked at?
No, we had one guy who died on the job, but it was because he He basically had a heart attack while he was on a call and died. And he was a young guy. And I think he had an underlying condition that he didn't know about. But it was pretty shocking because he was a young guy. It's funny. He was a relatively new guy. And remember how I told you you can tell a fire truck is where you have the guy at the back steering the back end?
Yeah.
And I literally had been training him how to do that like a week before.
Wow.
And then a week later, he had a heart attack and died. He was like 33 years old,
Jesus.
Yeah. So that was a shocker. But no, I didn't have any of my fellow guys get killed on duty. I was at a really, really big fire, probably one of the biggest fires I ever went to, big warehouse fire. And it was such a big fire that we had to call in support from other cities around us. And actually it was Hayward Fire Department, the town I grew up in.
Yeah.
We fought this fire all through the night. It came in at midnight, and at 9:00 the next morning, we were finally getting relieved, to go home. And so there were just some hot spots here and there. And so they had their 100-foot aerial ladder up. And this guy was on the tip of the ladder, just hitting hot spots from up there. And their ladder had a mechanical failure. The ladder is in sections, right?
Yeah.
It started coming down, All of a sudden you heard like a snapping sound, and then you heard a like that. And the ladder, boom, boom, it started collapsing, and he fell off of there from 100 feet.
Jesus.
And I saw that, and it was one of those things where it looks like it's happening in slow motion,
Yeah.
So I see him falling, and everybody was just like, oh my God. And we ran around there, and I have to admit, I totally expected to see a guy just splat on the ground, And I'll be damned, he didn't get hurt at all. He didn't even break a bone.
Oh, wow.
He didn't even break a bone. He fell 100 feet with his breathing apparatus on.
Yeah.
And so at the time, the station I worked at, we had a truck. And I remember when we came in the next shift, I told my crew, okay, we all saw that. And that was one of the scariest things we've ever seen. I go, I don't know about you guys, but I'm afraid that that's going to make me afraid to go back up on the ladder. I go, so the first thing we're going to do today is we're putting that ladder up and we're all climbing it right now before we let it get in our head,
Yeah.
So that's what we did. But yeah, the guy, he didn't even get hurt. I mean, I thought he was going to be dead.
What did he land on?
The cement.
Jesus. That's wow.
Unbelievable. It's one of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I believe you. Oh, God. And I guess there was no protocol of tying yourself up to the structure so you can't fall off?
There's a thing called a ladder belt. You put this belt around your waist, and then it has let's say a 5-inch carabiner, and then you hook into a rung. Obviously, he didn't have that on, right? That's what happens. You take chances, and it bites you in the butt.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, okay, we can switch gears completely if that's okay.
Okay.
We can talk about music a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It turns out that I had a good idea of what I wanted to do with this podcast, but over the episodes, I realized that I talked less and less about music and more about everything else.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that, I guess.
Well, you know what? That's what I like about it is, most of the people that you've talked to, we all know them through, Rock Solid and
yeah.
And I felt like I knew these people, but I learned new things about all of them. Even Pat, even our old buddy Pat Francis, I learned stuff about him I didn't know. So I like that about it.
Yeah, that's true. That was an unexpected, pleasant surprise. Actually, we will switch gears to something else before music. You mentioned that you wanted to be a sports journalist originally. So obviously you're into sports big time. And you're a San Francisco Giants fan.
Yes, I am.
Do you follow other sports?
I love the San Francisco Giants, the San Francisco 49ers,
okay,
and the Golden State Warriors. And those have been my teams my whole life, okay? I am not a fair weather fan. I stick with my teams through the bad years. I mean, obviously, the Giants, they had their run where they won those 3 World Series, right? But for the majority of my life, they've been terrible. And I stick with them. I stick with my teams. I stick with my music people, I'm loyal, okay?
Mhm.
Because what I always say is all those bad years, when they do finally have a good year, that's what makes the good years so good.
Yeah, I
You know what I
agree.
mean?
Absolutely.
And I look back when I was a kid and I started loving the Giants, they pretty much sucked every year. But you know what? I look back on those teams and I love those teams,
Mhm.
even though they never won. Those players when I was a kid, I mean, I love those players, So I love those. And then I grew up in a big bowling family, okay?
Okay.
My dad is a big bowler. He's 84 years old. Obviously, he hasn't been able to bowl this last year because of the pandemic. They closed all that around us. But my dad is a big bowler. So I grew up loving bowling as a kid. And so I love to bowl. I love to watch bowling on TV, like the Pro
Okay.
Bowler. I still watch it. I love that. And then since I've retired, I've really gotten into golfing these last 2-3 years.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, that's really been fun because one of the main things that remained open during the pandemic was golf courses.
True.
They closed for a very short amount of time, but then they reopened. And so that was really a saving grace to be able to do that. I got 3 or 4 of my buddies from the fire department. We're all retired and we go golfing every week. Pretty much almost every Wednesday we go.
Mhm.
And man, was that great, to be able to, I look forward to that so much every week, getting to go hang out with them and be outside, during the pandemic and have something to do. And I've improved so much. So that's really been great too,
Mhm.
to see my improvement, since I've started going with them. Because when they first called me up when I retired and they, hey, Tom, you want to come golfing with us? And my first thing was like, oh, no, you don't want me coming with you. I'm terrible. I hit the ball all over the place. I'm going to hold you guys up. And they were like, no, come with us, So, and I was just talking with some friends about this last night. The key about golf, because I've tried to golf ever since I was a teenager,
Mhm.
and I was always terrible at it. And the reason why is because the other people I golfed with were terrible. The key about golfing is you need to have someone with you that knows what they're doing so they can give you some tips.
Mhm.
So the guys that I golf with, they were all better than me, so they gave me tips. And Patrick, I'm telling you, when I first started golfing with them, I was like in the 120s.
Mhm.
And now I'm consistently in the 90s.
Nice.
That's 30 strokes. And I've gotten 2 holes in one in the
Wow.
last 9 months. And all these guys I golf with, they're all way better than me. None of them, they don't have any holes in ones. So they're actually kind of pissed at me. They're like, oh, you got 2 of them, and I don't even have one. But it's been great. I've really, really enjoyed getting into golf over the last 3 years.
And I guess you're not a big hockey fan?
You know what? Hockey just never hit it with me. For one thing, all through my teenage years, we didn't have a hockey team here.
Yeah, you got San Jose in 91, I think.
Yes. And when I was a small kid, we had a hockey team here called the Seals.
California Golden Seals, yes.
Yeah.
With
And
the white skates.
Yes. I was very young then. I mean, I kind of remember them, but I remember hearing about the Seals, but that's one sport. I've been to a couple Sharks games. I mean, it's fun to go, like to be there.
Yeah.
It's really fun. I mean, you're in Canada. You guys love hockey up there. But one of the main complaints that people around here say, and I kind of agree with it. I don't know if you'll agree with it or not, is that the thing about hockey is it's a tough TV sport because it's hard to see the puck,
Before HD, definitely. But now it's less true, I'd say.
Better now?
Yeah,
Okay.
but you still have to pay attention, of course. And it used to be true. Absolutely.
Okay. So when the Sharks started up here, I remember thinking, oh, I'll get into hockey. And it just never has clicked with me.
They were bad for a long time.
They've had some good years. They've gotten right up to the finals and then they show. And I have to admit, although I bragged earlier that I'm not a fair weather fan, with hockey, I guess I am, because I did kind of get into it those years, like, when they would advance through the postseason.
Yes.
Then I would kind of get into it a little bit and like, oh, okay, let's see if they can do it, But no, it just hasn't really clicked with me, to be honest with you. Hockey just hasn't clicked with me.
That's okay. And the teams in Anaheim and LA, that's South California. Might as well talk about another planet, right?
You know what we say in the Bay Area? fuck LA.
Okay. I was expecting something like that. That's okay.
We say beat LA and we say fuck LA. We have a rivalry with LA.
For sure. I don't doubt it. That brings another question to mind. Before joining the firefighting department, well, I guess you were married already at that point, so you never were, I guess, interested in moving to another part of the country?
No, not really. You know what? I like it here, and my wife and I, we discuss that every now and then, now currently, like, hey, do you want to move somewhere to retire to? And our kids aren't really settled yet. Well, my son, he's settled because he's going to be working for Oakland. But my middle kid, my daughter, she's really into acting and she's a playwright. So she moves around a lot. She lived in Seattle for a while. Right now she lives in Chicago. Just last week she found out she scored the leading part in some Shakespeare thing in Montana.
Okay.
She's going to be moving to Billings, Montana for a few months to do that. And then my youngest daughter, the one that got married, she's settled. But, when you have kids and they're getting older, you don't want to move 1,000 miles away. And then like when the time comes where they have grandkids and stuff, you don't want to be, and, the big story in California these days is, oh, everybody's leaving California. Everybody's abandoning California. And my thing is, fine, abandon California. Leave more room for those of us that like it here. I'm blessed. Like I said, I have a good pension. My wife makes good money, so I can afford to live here. I totally understand that some people can't afford to live here. I get it. Okay, I totally get that. I'm lucky enough that I can afford to live here. I love the weather here. I love being near San Francisco, where we have sports and arts and culture. I don't want to live out in the middle of the boonies where a lot of the guys I work with in the fire department, that was always their goal. Man, when I retire, I'm going to move out to the middle of nowhere. That doesn't appeal to me at all. I mean, where I live right now, I can drive an hour and a half to the east and I'll be in the mountains. 2.5 hours, I can be in Yosemite.
Oh, okay.
I drive an hour the other way, I'm at the beach. You know what I mean? I drive an hour south, I'm at Santa Cruz. So everything I want is right here. I like it. You can't beat the weather here, Like the one place I always kind of thought I'd maybe like to move to would be like Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona area.
Okay.
But then I'm like, I like the heat, but I don't know if I like the heat that much, where it's like 115 degrees, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah. So no, I've lived here my whole life. I'm a proud, happy Californian. I like it here.
That works.
I know some people don't, and if you want to get out of here, get out. I'm fine with that.
No, yeah. I mean, it's like everything else, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Absolutely. So you have your Giants hat. Your favorite baseball player is Will Clark, I think.
Jack Clark, yes.
Sorry. Is it possible that you posted a picture of Will Clark at some point?
Oh, I probably
Facebook?
have.
Okay.
Oh, I love Will Clark too. But my favorite all-time player is Jack Clark.
All right.
And like I said earlier, he was on those shitty Giants teams when I was a kid.
Yes.
But he's my favorite. He's not just my favorite baseball, but he's my favorite athlete. He's my favorite guy.
Okay.
Because when I was a kid, man, oh God, I idolized him. And you know what's great about it is, as terrible and as bad as social media and Facebook can be, I've actually become friends with him now.
Oh.
And I've actually hung out with him and we know each other and I know his wife. And I'm happy to report he's a great guy. He's a nice guy. If you would have told me when I was 12 years old, hey, there's going to be a time in your life when you're going to have Jack Clark's phone number in your phone, my head would have exploded, right? But anyway, yeah, he's my favorite. A lot of people confuse him with Will Clark because they both played for the Giants.
Yes.
They both wore number 22. You know what I mean?
That's true. Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of times I'll be at the Giants game and I'll see these fans, right? And they're wearing these retro jerseys. It's of Giants and it'll say Clark 22. And I know, I'm like, okay, that was the jersey they wore in 1978. That's Jack Clark. That ain't Will Clark. And I'll say to the guy, hey, you big Jack Clark fan? And he'll be like, no, I like Will Clark. And I don't have the heart to tell him, that's a Jack Clark jersey you're wearing.
Yeah, you're bursting his bubble.
Yeah.
But how come you had the opportunity to meet him and become friend with him?
what happened was, it was kind of funny. On Facebook, you can create like a fan page, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I created a Jack Clark page, right? And I stole all these pictures off the internet, posted them, and took pictures of my old baseball cards and posted them. So I created this Jack Clark page on Facebook, right? So one day, out of the blue, I get my little messenger window pops up on my Facebook, and this lady goes, "Hey, why did you make that Jack Clark fan page?" And I go, "Because I'm his number one fan." "Why do you ask me?" And she goes, "Well, because I'm his wife."
Oh, wow.
And so then her and I get to chatting, and then she said, Jack wasn't much to be on social media, right? Well, at the time they were living in St. Louis, because he left the Giants and he played for the Cardinals.
Yes.
And he had great success with the Cardinals,
He played for the Red Sox as well, I think.
Red Sox, Yankees, Padres. Okay. But he left the Giants traded him to St. Louis. He played for St. Louis 3 years. And in those 3 years, they went to the World Series twice.
Oh, wow.
And both times it had a lot to do with him because he hit a lot of home runs, a lot of RBIs. So he's probably more beloved in St. Louis than he is here, even though he played here longer. So they were living in St. Louis at the time, and he was hosting sports talk radio. So when she sent me that message, she's like, "Hey, why'd you do this page?" And I'm his fan. Well, I'm his wife. And then she said, "Hey, Jack's on the radio right now. Here's the number. Call into his show." So I called into his show. This is in St. Louis. I'm here. I was actually in the firehouse at the time. So I called the station in St. Louis, and they're like, "Hey, this is KMOX or whatever the hell it was. What do you want to talk about?" And I go, "Well, I'm a big fan of Jack Clark from his days in the Bay Area, and I just wanted to call him up and let him know, hey, he hasn't been forgotten in the Bay Area." And they go, "Well, we're talking about Cardinals playoff baseball. I don't think we're going to have time for that, but we'll put you on hold." So they put me on hold. They go to commercial break. They come back from the commercial break, and I'm the very first guy they put on the air, right? So I'm just like, "Hey, Jack, I just want to call you and let you know you're my favorite player. I haven't forgotten about you." And he's like, "Oh, hey, man, that's great to hear. Thank you for calling in, blah, blah, blah." So we hang up. I go back to my computer. His wife's name is Angie, and Angie says, "I just heard your call. I can tell you just made his day. He's blah, blah, blah." And so just through talking, and then what ended up happening was Jack and Angie, they ended up moving back here to the Bay Area for a little while. And so we got together and we socialized with them, me and my wife and them, and we got to be friends with him. And he's just a great, nice guy. She's his wife's, she's really nice. I talk to her all the time on Facebook. They have since moved back to Missouri, so I don't get to see him in person. She told me just the other day that they're hoping to move back here to California. They lived in the Monterey area. And so they're hoping to come back, and if they do, we'll get together again. But yeah, it's just been great. It's like, this guy was it's like, I tell him all the time, I go, "Jack, you don't understand. I idolized you as a kid. And now we're sitting at the same table talking about how our knees are aching, and our shoulder hurts." And it's like, "You don't understand how surreal this is. This is like surreal to me, But yeah, he's my favorite ball player of all time.
Awesome. And they say never meet your heroes, but there are exceptions, I guess.
Yes. He was a good exception.
All right, so now we can switch to music for real.
Okay.
Can you play any music instruments?
I can play a few chords on the guitar, and I had a little bit of a natural ability on the drums. I always loved drums. Like as a kid, I loved watching the drums, right? Like I loved Kiss, as a kid, and I always watched Peter Criss, play the drums. And so maybe about 20 years ago, I broke down and just bought a set of drums and set them up. Our master bedroom is huge, so we got this whole section that just sits there empty. So I set the drums up in there.
Okay.
Never took a lesson. A lot of songs I just figured them out, and I could play along with them just by listening to them, And then at one point, my son, he started fooling around with them. He actually got really good. And then I'll be damned, then they kind of sat there for a while, and I didn't touch them much. And 6 months, I bet, before the pandemic, I sold the drums, right?
Oh.
And then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, damn it, I wish I still had them, But like, technically, no, I don't know how to play anything. Whatever I know how to do on guitar, I've taught myself, D, G, C, E minor, all those basic chords. When I can find a song that has all those basic chords in them, I can play it. But when it gets to those bar chords, I can't do it.
Okay, so what was the first song that blew your mind?
Okay. I would think, and this goes back to when you and I were both at that live Rock Solid taping. Because
Hmm.
I think the theme that night was like your favorite song, like Pat wanted us to play our favorite song or something like that.
Yep.
And the song that I brought that night was my very first ever favorite song. So this would probably be the one that like first blew my mind. And the song is I'll Be Around by the Spinners.
Okay.
Do you remember that song?
I'm afraid I don't.
No? I loved that song as a kid. And
What year was that?
oh god. That song probably came out, I'm gonna guess, 1972 maybe?
Okay.
You know, it's funny, Patrick. I tell you how loyal I am, right?
Sure.
That was my first favorite song.
Uh-huh.
Okay. 2 hours ago, I was at the gym running. That song is on my running playlist.
Okay.
Now, in the year 2021, that song is still on my running playlist.
Fantastic.
And I love it.
All right. So which would be your top three bands?
It's funny you say top three because I have a very distinct top three.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is Thin Lizzy.
Okay.
I love them. But my top three would be Thin Lizzy, U2, and Bruce Springsteen.
All right.
Those are my top three. With Thin Lizzy is always number one. And then depending on my mood, U2 and Bruce Springsteen is 2 and 3. You know, they'll flip flop, you know. You know how it is, like you go through a phase where you're listening to a ton of Bruce Springsteen. Then maybe you'll go 6 months without listening to any. So if I happen to be in a Bruce Springsteen phase, then he's my number two. If I happen to be in a U2 phase, then they're my number two. But
Mm-hmm.
Thin Lizzy, U2, Bruce Springsteen, that's my holy trinity.
It's pretty much set in stone. Awesome. Okay, so the next question on my list, okay, sports, we covered that a little bit. The next question I have is travel? Question mark? Are you big on traveling, or did
My
you?
answer would be yes.
Okay. And next question, where?
I do love to travel. That was one of the things that was really bumming me out, you know, during the COVID thing, because I feel like I handled COVID pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a guy, you know, I don't get depressed. I don't get high. I don't get low. I'm pretty even keeled, you know, most of the time. But the one thing that did bum me out during COVID was not being able to travel, because that was one of the things I was really looking forward to when I retired, you know, was
Yeah,
being
yeah.
able to travel. And it would really hit me when I'd be sitting at home at night watching, you know, you kind of would forget that the pandemic was going on, right? So you're sitting at home, I'm sitting at home watching a movie, and maybe the movie is set in New York City. And I'd be watching the movie and I'd be like, oh man, New York, I haven't been there in like 10 years. We need to go to New York. And then I'd be like, oh shit, we can't go to New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love to travel. My wife and I, we've been to, out of the country, we've gone to Paris, Rome, Florence, London, Edinburgh,
Mm.
Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm forgetting something here. And then we travel. I love to travel around the United States. We were just in Anaheim. I mean, that's not a big trip, but we were just in Anaheim 3 days ago to see the Giants and the Angels
Mm-hmm.
play. Because another thing we love to do is travel around to the different ballparks
Mm-hmm.
and see the Giants. And we like to. I'm trying to notch off all the ballparks. You know, I want to be able to say that I've been to all of them. And there's 30, 32 stadiums, whatever. I think I've been to about 18 or 20 of them. You know?
Okay.
So I've been to a lot of them. Next mid-July, me and my son are going to go to New York, and we're going to go see Springsteen on Broadway.
Okay.
And then we're also going to see the Red Sox and play the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. I've been to the old Yankee Stadium,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't been to the new Yankee Stadium. So that'll be one to
Another.
notch off my
Exactly.
list.
Nice.
Yeah, but we love to travel. We love to go camping. My daughter, the one that lives in Chicago, last summer, we took a road trip and drove there. And on the way out and the way back, I think we hit 8 national parks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we went to a bunch of national parks. And yeah, so the answer is yes. We do love to travel. And I think the next place we want to go out of the country is Greece. We've kind of had our eyes set on that. We've never been there before.
Oh, that's a good place to start again.
Well, you know what? I
to
mean,
quote Billy Idol.
well, when I've seen Greece, in like movies and stuff, have you been to Greece?
No, not yet.
That blue water,
Oh, yeah, it looks incredible.
Oh, I got to dive into that, like in Mamma Mia, and they show that blue water. Oh my God, I want to jump into that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's on the list. Let's go back to sports for 4 quick questions. What is your favorite sports movie?
Okay, I think my favorite sports movie would be, I love Field of Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
That one always gets a tear in my eye at the end. I love The Natural. And here's what I thought of, especially for you. Okay, do you like soccer or do you not like soccer?
Oh, yeah, I love soccer.
Okay. I didn't, because your show's called Everything Except the Football. I didn't know if you meant like I don't even want to talk about it, or if you meant enough people talk about it, we can talk about something else.
It was an inside joke for another podcast I take part in sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Because it is named Don't Mention the Foosball. And it was like a follow-up on that, but like, a private joke, that inside joke that only me understand. So it's a terrible title, but I'm kind of stuck with it now. But
okay, well, here's a movie I remember loving. And since you're a hardcore soccer fan,
mm-hmm.
you may look at this movie the way I look at Backdraft. Okay. So you may look at this movie and think, oh, that's stupid. But I remember loving this one when it came out. I think it was called Victory. And it was the one with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
And where they were going to play the soccer and they were going to escape from the concentration camp.
Yes.
I remember loving that movie.
It is, I don't know if naive is the right word, but it's like refreshingly
innocent.
But innocent, innocent, I guess you could say. But I mean, I've never seen all of it. I've only seen parts of it. I should give it a watch with fresh eyes. One of these
I remember
days.
loving that as a kid, and remember Pele was in that.
Yes, yeah. He scores the bicycle kick at the end. Yes,
yeah. Michael Caine was the coach. I think what the gist of the story was if they threw that last game, they were going to release them from the camp, and they were like, no, we're gonna win the game, And I think they won the game, and then I think they were still able to escape for some reason. I remember going to see that movie as a kid in the theater, and why I went and saw it, I don't know, because I never had been a big soccer. Maybe because we all loved the Sylvester Stallone back then, because we were still on that high from the first Rocky movie, But I remember liking that one.
Okay.
But I haven't seen it in ages.
All right. Is there a sports movie that you cannot stand?
I'll tell you what. I told you earlier, I come from a bowling family, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably aren't aware of this, but they actually made a movie about a guy trying to become a pro bowler.
Okay.
It was called The Dreamer or Dreamer.
Okay.
The star was Tim Matheson, the guy from Animal House?
Yes.
And he was trying to become a professional bowler. And this movie was so stupid. And it's laughably bad. It's one of those ones you watch and it's not trying to be a comedy, but it is a comedy. And they get everything wrong. And it's over dramatic. And, it's the scenes that are supposed to be so dramatic, you're laughing at them, So that's a terrible movie.
Okay. All right. Next question. What is your favorite sports book?
It's hard for me to pinpoint one, but I love reading, biographies of ball players.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to read a book about a ball player, it's going to be someone that I like or I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to hear the behind the scenes stuff. Okay. I'll give you an example. I just read a biography by this guy. He played for the Giants back in the 70s. His name was John D'Acquisto.
Okay.
He was a pitcher. I mean, he wasn't even a big star. And, he obviously just decided to sit down and write a book, right? Because I don't think anybody was clamoring for the life story of John D'Acquisto. But he wrote it, and I read it just like a couple months ago, and I loved it because, well, for one thing, he had a lot of good Giant stories,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the behind the scenes aspect of it, talking about when you get traded and talking about how when he was a rookie, how the older ball players treated him. And like said, "Hey, kid, go get our stuff," and like talking about how much drinking those guys did. You know, I wouldn't think athletes do that nowadays because there's so much money at stake. You know,
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
but God, these guys would drink themselves silly, like the day before they were going to pitch or something. You know.
Okay.
I love that kind of stuff. You know, and I'm the same way with movies. You know, I love documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, even if I don't care about the subject, I like seeing the behind the scenes stuff. You know?
I don't. Okay, there are two questions that came in my mind. Do you remember the player who said he pitched a game on LSD?
Doc Ellis.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Pittsburgh Pirates. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And another baseball book that, popped into my mind, Ball 4.
Yes. Okay.
Is it good?
Yes.
I've never read it.
Well,
it's
you
on
know
my
what?
list.
Okay. Well, if you read it now, it might be a little outdated because, those were old ball players. But the theme of that book or whatever, that book was basically written like a diary. So that's written by a guy named Jim Bouton. He was a pitcher.
Yes.
And so I think he just kept a diary and then they turned it into a book. Okay. And then another good one like that is called The Bronx Zoo, written by Sparky Lyle.
That rings a bell, yes.
That was same thing. It was like diary in the form of a diary. And that was back in the late 70s, early 80s, those crazy Yankee teams with Billy Martin, Reggie Jackson, and Steinbrenner. Yeah. When they're all they're fighting each other in the dugout. Yes. Yeah. And I remember reading those, back when those first came out. I loved them. Those were good. Yeah.
Okay. It's not a baseball book, but I remember Andre Agassi's biography called Open. I'm not even a tennis guy, but that is a great biography. If you had a chance to check it out, it's worth it. Okay, next question. What is your earliest memory of a sports event? Not in person, like on TV.
Oh.
It could be in person, actually.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you my early TV and my early in person. My earliest sports memory watching TV would be watching when Mark Spitz won all those medals at the Olympics for swimming. I didn't understand like the time difference, because I remember like we're watching it at like 9:00 at night, and I'm like going, "What time is it in Germany? They're swimming right now." It was probably like tape delayed, but I didn't know that at the time. But that's my earliest memory of seeing some sports thing on TV. And then my earliest in-person memory was I still have some pretty clear memories of the very first baseball game I went to. And it probably was right around that same time, like 72, 73, because I was very small. And I remember going to the Giants game at Candlestick Park, and I remember they played the St. Louis Cardinals, and I remember that the Giants won the game. But the other thing I remember is Lou Brock. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
Big star with the Cardinals back in those days. He was a big base stealer,
Yes.
He stole home in that game.
Oh, wow.
So nice. I remember that. I remember Lou Brock stole home. And I remember the Giants won the game. And my mom and dad, they're pretty, they're kind of cheapskates, like as kids, if we went to a baseball game or if they took us to amusement park, they never bought us like a souvenir, or they never bought, they wouldn't even buy us food, nothing. But they did buy me a pennant at that game.
Okay.
And I still have it. It's hanging on my wall downstairs. I still have that pennant from that very first game.
Wow.
And that was probably 72, 73, right around in there.
That's pretty awesome. It is. Next question. Well, it might be the answer. What is your favorite or most memorable game that you saw in person?
You know what? I am so lucky. I have been to some really good games in person. I've been lucky. Probably my most memorable 49er game was I actually got to go to the NFC Championship game. It was in 84, I think it was. It was the Niners versus the Bears. And this is when the Bears had Jim McMahon and all those guys. They would go on to win the Super Bowl the next year.
Yeah.
But this year, the 49ers won. And so we went over to the Candlestick Park for the NFC Championship game. We didn't have tickets. It was me and my friend. We didn't have tickets to the game. But his uncle was a San Francisco police officer, and he was working the game, like as security or whatever. And he told us, "You guys come to the game." He goes, "I'll put handcuffs on you. I'll make it look like I'm arresting you, and I'll march you in, and then I'll let you go. And then whatever you do after that, it's up to you. So that's what we did. And we got into the game. The 49ers won that game 23-0. And then they went to the Super Bowl. I think it was Miami, and they kicked Miami's ass in the Super Bowl. So that's a great memory. I was as a very young kid, I remember going to a Golden State Warriors game, and they played the Sixers. And this is when Dr. J was playing.
Yeah.
And I saw him do one of his badass dunks. Yes.
Yeah.
I saw him do one of those in person as a kid. And back in those days, they'd let you walk right down to courtside, like when the second half was starting.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember me and my little friend, we were probably like 9 years old, and we walked down there. And when he came walking out, out onto the court, we stuck our hands out and he high-fived us. And we were like, Dr. J, he high-fived us,
Wow.
And then about 3 years ago, me and one of my buddies from work, we flew to Cleveland and we went and watched one of the finals games with the Warriors against the Cavs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I got to see that. I've been to 3 World Series games with the Giants, and the Giants won all 3 of the games I was at.
Wow.
One of the games I was at was the game when Pablo Sandoval hit 3 home runs.
Okay.
So I was at that. I got to go to 5 or 6 playoff games for the Giants, when they were in the playoffs. I've been lucky. I've been lucky to go to some good games.
Yeah. For sure. Jesus. Wow. That's a good list. It is. All right. So we can tweak those questions for music if you want.
Yep.
For music then, what is your favorite music movie? Okay.
My favorite music movie would be similar to my answer about the books. I love documentaries, right? So I am just a sucker for a music documentary. Did you see the one on Anvil, the heavy metal group?
Yeah, I love the story of Anvil. Yeah, yes. It's awesome.
I loved it.
It is really good.
That Bee Gees documentary that just came out a couple months ago, loved it. The Rush documentary that came out, a couple years ago. I'm a sucker for those. That Eagles documentary.
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God. That thing, you don't even need to be an Eagles fan. It's so compelling to watch,
And Don Henley is still an asshole in it.
And you know what? He seems to be proud of being an asshole.
Jesus.
He doesn't even seem to want to hide it,
Wow. Okay.
But those, I love those kind of movies, right? I also love that one that came out a few years ago called Sing Street.
Yeah.
That was a great movie. When I was a kid, I loved Grease when that came out, I would have to say music documentaries are what I love. I love, Netflix, they put out a lot of good ones, and there's a lot of them on Amazon. Some of those kind of suck though, because some of them are really like low budget,
Siegel said the same thing.
Yeah. And you find them and it's like, oh, cool. They got a documentary on Michael Schenker. And then you watch it and it's like, oh shit, looks like some kid put this together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
But a good quality music documentary, that'll hook me every time. And even if it's someone that I don't even really like that much, I love it. I love that behind the scenes stuff,
And what about your least favorite one?
I'll tell you one that I was really disappointed in was the movie version that they put out of Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
I really didn't care for that. And I had high hopes for it, I'm a kid from the 80s. All those songs, those were my songs. And I kind of heard about that show, like as a Broadway show. And I remember hearing about it and thinking, oh, that sounds like something I'd like. And then the movie came out and I didn't like the way Tom Cruise played his character. I don't know. I wouldn't say I hated it, but I was disappointed in that one. I remember me and my wife, we went to the movies, to see it. And that girl, Julianne Hough, she was the star, and it's like, ugh, I should have known better.
Well, that happens, We cannot bat 1,000, or that kind of thing. What is your favorite book related to music?
This is a weird one because I love the Replacements. You asked me earlier about my 3 favorite bands. Those top 3, those are chiseled in stone, like you said. And then I got a bunch of other ones that are just right outside that top 3 area. And the Replacements are one of them. And they put this book out about them a couple years ago. It was called Trouble Boys. And it was all about the Replacements. And this guy, I'll tell you what, the guy that wrote that book, man, did he research. I mean, he really did a hell of a job. And I love The Replacements. I love Paul Westerberg. And I mean, it's a great book. I mean, if you want to read a book about The Replacements, you can't find a better book than this. But it was a hard book to read because they were so self-sabotage themselves, so much.
Okay.
Anytime they had a chance at getting some good success and maybe becoming more well known, they blew it. They'd get really drunk and they'd fuck up their show, or they'd tell the guy from the record company to kiss their ass. You know what I mean? I mean, and I guess that's like a punk rock thing to do, but I actually found it hard to read because you're reading the book and you're going, guys, why'd you do that? Yeah,
You cringe all the time.
So, I mean, that was a great book, but it was hard to read. It was kind of like, oh, shit, why'd they do that, But, yeah, I'm drawing a blank a little bit. But that's another thing that I do. I read a lot of music books, too. I love reading. I read a crazy book a while back, and this guy wrote a whole book it was all about Kiss, Aerosmith, Cheap Trick, and this other lesser-known band called Stars, and the effect that the four of them had on music in the 70s and how they were all kind of intertwined, and that was really interesting because I like all those bands, and that was an interesting read.
What's that book called?
Oh God, I think the title was a take on a lyric from one of the songs, like "We're all right," like from Cheap Trick, "Surrender."
Okay.
If you're interested, I'll have to tell you later. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what it's called, but you know how I heard about it on. I listened to Eddie Trunk. Do you know who he is? I listened to him, and the guy who wrote the book was a guest on his show. And then that made me like, oh, I think that would interest me. And, I found the book on Amazon. I read it in like 2 days,
Okay.
I just gobbled it up.
Nice. All right. Next question. What was your first concert?
My first concert was Thin Lizzy. December 19th, 1980, the Warfield Theater in San Francisco, the Chinatown tour. Phil Lynott was still alive, so I got to see him in person. And I'll tell you what, you talk about a life-changing thing, how you hear a lot of these rock stars when they get interviewed, and so many of them refer back to the night they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. My Beatles on Sullivan was Thin Lizzy in San Francisco. Okay.
Wow.
I loved it. I loved it. And I've been to I don't know how many hundreds of concerts since then, but that's still, if not my favorite, it's one of my favorites. I mean, I loved it. You couldn't shut me up for 2 weeks after that. All I did was talk about that. I think my mom and dad were like, enough already. Okay. We've heard enough.
All right. Well, okay. So that's probably the answer to the follow-up question. What is your favorite or most memorable concert?
Okay. I'll tell you one. I'll tell you a different story.
Please.
Do you know who Glenn Hansard is?
What's the name again?
Glenn Hansard. He's from Ireland.
Okay, no, I don't.
Okay, he's in a band called The Frames, and he starred in that movie Once. Did you ever see that? Once?
Nope.
Okay, Patrick, write that down.
Okay.
You need to watch that.
Okay.
And you know what? And I'll also use that as an answer to the previous question when you're asking me about my favorite music movies. Add that one to the list. It's called Once.
Okay.
You're gonna love it. Okay.
All right.
Anyway. So this guy, Glenn Hansard, he's from Ireland, and he's in a band called The Frames. He's in the movie The Commitments.
Yeah.
Okay. He has a small part in that. He's the star of this movie Once. It's a low-budget indie film, and he plays a street busker, and he meets up with this girl who's from Czechoslovakia, and she's a street busker, and they come together and start making music together, and they obviously fall in love with each other, but there are reasons why they can't be together. And it's such a good movie that when you watch it, you almost feel like it's a documentary. It almost seems real. That's how good it is.
Wow. Okay.
So this movie was a big hit when it came out. It actually won the Academy Award for the best song that year. And once you hear the song, you're going to recognize that too, because it was a big hit at the time.
Okay.
Anyway, the movie Once was such a big hit and the music was such a big hit that they stayed together, him and her, and they formed a band. And they called themselves The Swell Season. Okay. They made a couple albums of original material. They went out on tour and they played their original material. And then they played the songs from the movie Once. So me and my wife go to see them, and they played at a winery that has an amphitheater. beautiful. It's in Saratoga, which is wine country that near San Jose. So the setting is beautiful. It's outdoor. The weather's always nice. They have shows there during the summer. It's an amphitheater, so it's a bowl, right? So it sits down below ground level. Patrick, in the middle of the concert, some guy was up on top. There's a road that runs up on top of the stage. The guy ran and jumped and killed himself in front of all of us.
Jesus.
Yeah. He jumped to his death on the stage. So,
wow.
So Glenn Hansard's up there. It's at a point in the show where the band leaves the stage and he's just up there playing acoustic guitar. And all of a sudden you see this body come flying out of the darkness. Boom, hits the stage. And I think for a split second there, all of us in the audience thought it was part of the show.
Yeah.
Right? And then all of a sudden, Glenn Hansard, he starts screaming. He's going, help, help. I mean, he starts screaming, right? And so people ran down, to help. And like I ran down and it just by pure coincidence, a guy I worked with, him and his wife were at the show too. He ran down. The guy killed himself. He jumped to his death in front of all of us. So talk about a memorable concert experience.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And after it happened, you could have heard a pin drop in that place. And this is coming from me. I've seen a million dead bodies in my life, right? But I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that was crazy. So yeah, that's my most memorable thing, and hopefully I'll never see anything like that again.
Yeah, that's memorable. All right. Jesus. Wow. Okay. Next question. What was the scariest concert crowd you've ever been caught in?
I think the scariest moment I ever had at a concert was when I was in high school and we went to go, me and a bunch of my buddies, we went to go see Ozzy Osbourne. Okay. And his first, that first solo album, Blizzard of Oz, had just come out. And so we went to see him at this concert, pretty well-known concert venue in the Bay Area called the Cow Palace. Okay. It's a big stadium arena type place. And we cut school and we went there early, right? We wanted to spend the whole day, sitting out there drinking beers and stuff. And I'll tell you what, that was the scariest crowd of people I've ever been in. And at one point, because you got to remember, I was like 15 years old at the time, and they had us all lined up, to go in. And it was, that was general admission seating, so the doors would open and people would just run in, right? Well, they had us all in lines with like sawhorses as barricades. And the next thing you know, the crowd just was like, fuck it. And they broke down the barricades and they charged the building. And at one point, guys started throwing Molotov cocktails.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So this guy, he sets up the bottle. He puts the rag in there. He lights the rag on fire. He brings his arm back, to throw it. And when he brings his arm back, his buddy's standing behind him and he set him on fire.
Wow.
And I just remember, I just was like,
I wish I was a fireman so I can help the guy.
Well, I was just like in this crowd, I'm going, my God, because when I was young and I wanted to go to concerts, that's what my mom would always say. You shouldn't go to concerts. You're going to get killed. You're going to get killed. And I remember that night thinking, shit, she's right. I might get killed tonight in this crowd. But you know what? I got to see Randy Rhoads that night.
Oh, okay.
And he got killed about a week later. So I can say I saw Randy Rhoads at least.
Wow. And what about the guy? Do you know if he turned out all right? The guy who caught on fire?
Oh, I remember he fell to the ground and people started putting him out,
Okay.
But I just was thinking, my God, this is like being in a war zone,
Yeah. The show hasn't even started and they start throwing Molotov cocktails already. Imagine during the show.
It was crazy.
Jesus. Next question. Is there a band that turned you into a fan after you saw them live?
Yeah. And the one that comes right off the top of my head was my son. This was probably about 10 years ago. He's 32 now. So you know what? It was more than 10 years ago because him and three of his buddies were going to go see Red Hot Chili Peppers in concert. Okay. Well, one of his buddies was a couple years older than them. He was like kind of the responsible one of the group. Right. And so I figured, Doug can kind of act as the chaperone, Well, about a week or so before the concert, Doug couldn't go for some reason. So then they're like, hey, do you want to come with us? And I have to admit, I just didn't care for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't hate them, but they weren't anybody I would ever go see in concert. But I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll go. I'll go be the chaperone. And I have to say, they won me over. They were really, really good. And the opening band that night was Coheed and Cambria.
Yeah.
And they won me over too.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard them before, and they were really good. But the funny thing is, I bought a CD of theirs afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it. But that night in concert, I liked them. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers put on a great show. And I came away a fan of them after that.
Nice. I saw them in Quebec City, Coheed and Cambria.
Oh.
And I didn't know anything about them either. I went with a friend. And solid stuff.
Yeah. Nice. I liked them.
All right. So, okay, next question. What is your most memorable brush with fame?
Okay, my most memorable one, I mean, obviously I just told you about Jack Clark, and it's so great that I've actually got to be friends with him. But my best musical brush with fame, without a doubt, and trust me, you don't want to get me started on this because this is a long story. But when my son was about 18 years old, he won a contest on MySpace, back when MySpace was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he won a contest where he got to go on tour with Lenny Kravitz from San Francisco all the way to New York.
Jesus.
And he got to bring a guest along, so he brought me. So we got to go on tour with Lenny Kravitz. We were on tour with him for 15 days. We saw 9 concerts. We started in San Francisco. We went to Vegas, Denver, Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, Philly, Boston, New York. I think that's it. And during that time period, we actually got to hang out with Lenny Kravitz, several times.
Mm-hmm.
We got to meet him backstage. We got to go on his tour bus. I can tell you this. I can say that I've had Lenny Kravitz pop a beer for me.
Okay.
We went out to dinner with him. When we were in Chicago, we were there for 2 nights. He took us out to dinner with him both nights. And I will put it to you this way. I wasn't a big fan of his. I could take him or leave him. But my son loved him, right? Like my son loves him. He's his favorite guy. So when my son won this contest and, hey, we're going to go on this tour and we're going to meet Lenny. We're going to hang out with Lenny. And he's like, we're going to be friends with Lenny, and I'm like, hey, listen, if Lenny says hello, just consider yourself lucky, right?
Yeah.
Because I was actually afraid. I was afraid he was maybe going to be kind of an asshole,
Yeah, because that's the vibe he gives out. Yeah.
I thought he would be full of himself.
Yes.
I thought he would blow us off. Patrick, it couldn't have been more the opposite.
Okay.
That Lenny Kravitz is an awesome dude. And he treated us so nice. And he was so nice to my son. And we were eating dinner one night, one of those nights in Chicago, we're eating dinner. And Lenny starts asking my son, hey, what do you think about the set list? And my son's like, well, you know what? If I was you, I'd play, you should play such and such song and do that little sax break in the middle like you did back in 1987. And then you should play that one song and open with that one song the way you did in 1993. And it's funny. And then Lenny looks at me and he goes, he knows his shit. And I go, yes, he does. And my son had written this all down on a piece of paper, right? And he hands it to him. The next night, he played the set list like that.
Wow.
Can you believe it? So then the next night we're eating dinner. We're eating dinner with him in Chicago at this Japanese restaurant at like 2:00 in the morning, right? And then my son said something to him like, hey, you did the set list like I asked you to do. And he looks at him and he goes, hey, you asked me to. I had to, man.
Jesus.
So Lenny Kravitz, and his right-hand man is Craig Ross. That's his guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
Just, dude, great guys. And to this day, my son has kept in contact with Craig, the guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
And Lenny, we don't keep in contact with him. But, since that time, when Lenny Kravitz has come through the Bay Area 2 or 3 times, and my son will send a message to Craig, hey, we want to come and see you. He's left us backstage passes every time.
Wow.
And we go backstage after the show and he gives us food and drink and we sit back there and chat. Now, I will tell you this. If I ever did run into Lenny Kravitz, and I had a chance to say, hey, Lenny, it's me. Because he always called me Pops because I was the oldest guy there, you know. If I said, hey, Lenny, it's me, Pops, remember me from the bus tour? I think he would remember. You know, I think he would because we really hit it off and he was a great guy. So that was a once-in-a-lifetime experience doing that.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. Next question. What piece of music memorabilia would you like in your house?
Okay, I'll tell you what I would love to have. Because I'm such a big Thin Lizzy fan, and Phil Lynott, you know, he played the bass.
Mm-hmm.
What he was famous for was on his bass, you know that piece that's called the pick guard? It's like right below the strings, and it's usually a different color than the body of the guitar.
Okay.
He was well known for having a stainless steel pick guard on his bass. And so when the lights in a concert, when the light would hit that pick guard just right, that light would bounce back and it would just blind you, you know, if you were in the crowd. And I can remember being at that first concert. I remember having that light just shining in my eyes. So I would love to have one of his old basses with that stainless steel pick guard on there and hang it on my wall.
Nice. Okay, so last question focused on music. Name me a cover song that was better than the original.
Okay, I'm sure there's a million, you know, examples of this, but here's one I'll give you. And this is another song that goes back to when I was a kid that I love.
And it's the first time I'm asking that question, so you are the trailblazer, yes.
Okay, good. So there's no way I'm copying anybody. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, are you familiar with the song Strawberry Letter 23 by the Brothers Johnson?
Nope.
Okay, write that down, listen to it. You'll recognize it. I love that song. That song goes back to when I was a kid, and that song is a cover song.
Okay.
It was originally done, the name of the guy is escaping my mind right now, but he was kind of like an old blues guy, I think. And then they did a cover of it, and I love that song so much. Like Quentin Tarantino, he uses it in the movie Jackie Brown.
Okay.
And there's a scene in the movie where Samuel Jackson, he goes and picks up Chris Tucker.
Yeah.
Chris Tucker like screwed him over. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he goes and gets it, and you know he's going to kill him, right? You just know he's going to kill him. But he's like going, hey, man, come on, come with me, man. Let's go take a ride, you know? And Chris Tucker's like, no, I don't want to go, you know? No, come on, man. You know, and I think he throws the body in the trunk of his car.
I think, yeah, he convinced him to get in the trunk of the car. He drives to an empty lot, and then he pops the trunk. And as Chris Tucker says, man, I was sick of sitting in that trunk. Then he blows it away.
Bang. Yeah. Okay, I think it's when he gets him to get in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
When he slams the trunk lid, Strawberry Letter 23 starts to play.
Okay.
And it is such a great use of, you know, music in a movie. I mean, dude, it gives me goosebumps, you know? So anyway, that's my answer. Strawberry Letter 23 by the Brothers Johnson.
Tarantino is a master when it comes to picking songs for certain moments.
Yeah. My wife always tells me that I should get a job doing that.
Okay.
Because I'm always like saying, oh man, you know what would be a great song, like would be this or that. Or I always notice like when a song is used to a good effect like that, you know, like that's something that like she doesn't even notice, but like I notice it because I'm like, oh, that was perfect. And she's like, you should get a job. And I'm like, you don't understand. You don't just get a job like that. Hi, I'm here to apply for the guy who puts the music in the movies job.
The song picker. All right, so this is it for part 1. Tom, would you mind sticking around for part 2?
Sure, no problem.
All right, good answer.